Aside from comments and questions related to how I shoot and edit and use Flash and stuff like that, probably the next biggest category of questions I receive are questions related to my gear. What size octobox do I use? What kind of flash do I have? What camera am I shooting on? I figured to answer all those questions, I'm going to make a video dedicated specifically to my gear. Let's start off with the workhorse camera. This is what I use on probably 90% of the images that I take. This is the Sony A7 R4. For those who are not familiar, the R in the model name stands for resolution, and there is a ton of it in the image files that this camera produces. If you shoot horizontally, lengthwise, I don't know the actual megapixel count, but the lengthwise, these images are almost 10,000 pixels wide. So what that means to you as the photographer, that gives you plenty of wiggle room in the editing process to crop in, adjust, do whatever is needed, and you're really not going to lose any sharpness whatsoever. Now you may have noticed that the lens I'm using on the camera is clearly not a Sony. This is a Sigma. I would consider this kind of my workhorse lens. This is a Sigma 24-70 DGDN 2.8. So if I was forced to get rid of all my lenses but one, this is the one that I would keep, because clearly 24-70, it's going to be the most versatile, and Sigma produces fantastic lenses. It's super sharp, it's a beast of a lens, and it integrates and works well with the Sony camera system. Now, moving on, I guess you could call this I wouldn't necessarily call it my backup camera, because backup implies that I use this when this one doesn't work. This is mainly my Canon tilt shift camera, and the reason being is I have a Meta Bones adapter on here because the lens is a Canon 24mm tilt shift lens, but clearly because it's a Canon lens on a Sony body, I need some sort of adapter. But the camera body is a Sony A7 III, which was the first full frame Sony camera that I got, and I still use this to this day. In fact, I used this on a shoot 2 days ago. Yeah, I mean, it's a beast of a camera. It's a super versatile camera, especially if you're kind of a hybrid still and video shooter. I cannot endorse this camera enough, even though this camera body is considered maybe old at this point relative to the amount of cameras that have come out since this one did. But talk to any photographer who currently owns or has owned the Sony A7 III. I can almost guarantee that every single one of them is going to have nothing. They're going to do nothing but sing the praises about the Sony A7 III. Yeah, if you are in the market to get your first full frame mirrorless, I give my seal of approval, man. It's the Sony A7 III. All right, let's move on to other lenses. I'll talk about this briefly. Or no, let's stick with Sigma here for a bit. So the other lens that I have is a Sigma 14-24mm, same as the other Sigma. Let's see, what is this? A DGDN 2.8. I would say if you're more in real estate photography and you're shooting on Sony, this is another great lens. You'll probably use this one maybe more than the 24-70. And yeah, obviously comes in handy when you're shooting in really, really small and tight spaces. And side note, when it comes to equipment, another question related to it that I get from, or that I've heard from several photographers is, what do I spend my money on and what do I not spend my money on? Or basically, what's a waste of time? And to answer that question, Mike Kelly and I went over that exact subject in the money and finance portion of the Business of Architecture Photography video series. If you have no idea what it is, or you have not had a chance yet to check it out, I recommend that you do, because in that course, we don't really talk anything about how to shoot photos. What we do talk about is how to run the business side of being an architecture photographer. Not only do we go over money and finance, we go over sales and marketing, suggestions for your website, pricing your photography, licensing, copyright, what to do if or when one of your photos or videos goes viral. There is a ton that we cover, and it's all related to the business side of architecture photography. As photographers, we're so enamored with how-to videos and courses on how to edit and shoot. But in reality, if you put pen to paper, a majority of what we do is business related. We are emailing, we're submitting quotes, we're answering emails concerning copyright, licensing photos. The ironic part is, as photographers, it's really only a small fraction of our whole day or week where we might actually spend taking photos. And the really nice thing about this course is that you can cherry pick individual topics and subjects. If you want to hear Mike and I talk about just the subject of sales and marketing, that video course is $59.95. But if you want to grab the whole thing as one huge bundle, you'll get all those videos for $229.95. So yeah, huge savings if you just end up buying the whole course. You can check it out in the store at apalmanac.com. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Setting that aside, let's move on to, let's go to my other shift lenses. You've seen me talk about this on another video. This is the Laowa 20mm shift lens. I really do like this lens. I did end up getting one for myself. I don't regret getting this, but I am finding as time goes on, I'm using this less and less, just the same way that I mentioned I'm using 17mm, or I don't have the 17mm. I would rent it on occasion, but it's probably been 2.5 years since I've rented a 17mm tilt shift Canon. And I'm using this less and less because I'm not, just because of my own style and taste, I'm not running into a whole lot of scenarios where I need to shoot something at 20mm. But that being said, using this on my Sony A7R4, which is nice because they do mount directly to the Sony camera bodies, no adapter needed. The resolution on the Sony A7R4 gives me plenty of room to crop in and again, still retain a ton of detail and sharpness. The other one, which I mentioned on the other video, is the Laowa. I think this is the 15mm shift lens. This is the one with that front round bulbous element. Yeah, I hardly use this one anymore, honestly. Let's move on to some of my, what I would consider a must-have if you are in architecture and design or real estate photography, and that is the Camranger, or in this case, I have the Camranger 2, because the Camranger 2 is the only one that will talk and work with Sony cameras. And this is the first Camranger 2 that I've owned, but it's been through its paces. The antenna is clearly broken. So if you know a representative or if you know anybody at Camranger, send them a link to this video and give them the specific time code. Camranger, sure would appreciate a brand new one of these. And no, the wobbly antenna is no fault of your own. It's just, I use this on every single shoot, so it's bound to get beat up. Folks at Camranger, call me. Another piece of equipment that I used a lot, I carry in my camera bag on pretty much every shoot, is a power bank, kind of a must-have. And I'll show you here in a bit how I use this related to the Camranger and my tripod as well, so stay tuned for that. All right, flashes and light modifiers. This is another huge thing that I get asked about a ton. Let's start with the little guys. If you are just getting into using off-camera flash, I highly recommend Godox in general. Great value for the price. If something breaks, you're not going to cry over it because you didn't spend as much on it as you would, say, a what's the really expensive one? Is it Profoto? I think. Yeah, Profoto is just, I have a really hard time justifying spending that much on flash equipment, especially when you can get some equipment that's almost as good or just as good for a fraction of the cost, and Godox provides those products. This is the TT600. This is a really basic flash, and if you're getting into off-camera flash, I highly recommend grabbing one of these if they're still available. I think you can get one off Amazon or B&H for $50, $60. I don't think they're any more than $70. They do run on regular AA batteries, but the main reason I'm a huge advocate for these, for this model specifically, is because it's so simple to use. I know personally when I was looking at getting some sort of speed light flash, I would see these flashes with a ton of menus and buttons and bells and whistles, and I would just get overwhelmed. And in all reality, the two things you really need to control is the power, and then like a shotgun, the spread of the light. That's about it. And really, this menu system and the interface is so simple. That's about all you can change on this flash. So again, highly recommend the Godox TT600. All right, let's move up to the bigger guys. This is the Godox AD400 Pro. I don't want to keep saying I highly recommend everything. If I have it, I highly recommend it. So let's move past that. Everything that I have, I'm going to talk about. I've used it for a while and I do recommend it. Okay, Godox AD400 Pro. It's battery powered, and it does come with a charger, which is great, but this lasts so many flash pops. I probably charge this thing on average. Let me guess, if you were shooting real estate, you'd probably have to charge this once a week, if that, maybe once every 2 weeks. But the amount of power just the 400 puts out is fantastic. And again, the interface, the menu, all that stuff, it's really, really simple. If you're wanting to move up from something with a little bit more power than this, I highly recommend. I endorse the AD400 Pro. But if this is too much of a leap for you, Godox does have an in-between, and that is the Godox AD300 Pro. It's not a whole lot bigger than the TT600, but much like the 400, this does have a battery, which is rechargeable. It does come with the charging port. And I would guess, yeah, I mean, if you use this on on every single shoot, I mean, you might have to charge this again, maybe once every several days, once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, depending upon how much you use it. The other big thing I really, really like about this light is the modeling lamp. The modeling lamp on this thing is pretty bright. I think you can adjust the brightness, and I'm pretty sure you can adjust the color temperature. So if you are light painting and you say you have a longer shutter speed, you can use this to light paint certain areas and match the color temperature of, say, if you're shooting a twilight, you know, the sconces outside or the landscape lighting, things like that. Yeah, there we go. Right now, this is at full power of the modeling light, and the color temperature is at 3000 Kelvin. So we'll adjust the brightness here. Take this all the way down to 1. So we'll see the difference. There's 1. Up to 10. It does have an internal fan too, which you might be able to hear. Again, a big thing I love about Godox is the menu system is so simple. So 3000 Kelvin, and we're gonna bump that up to 6000. So I think 6000 is the highest it'll go on the Kelvin scale. And you might be able to see this on the camera. Yeah, 6000, and we go all the way down to 3. Yeah, that modeling light, I mean, that thing's pretty bright. And if you're getting into off-camera flash for the first time, huge recommendation for that one. Which brings me to the triggering system. I use, man, this thing is ancient at this point. This is the Godox X1T, and you'll see a little S there. That stands for Sony. This is a really simple interface. All this does, it mounts on the top hot shoe mount of your camera. And because it's such a good mount, I never tighten it. I'm kind of one of those guys, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And unfortunately, I think they either lowered production or they just don't produce the X1 transmitter anymore. And which reminds me, I need to buy another one of these so I at least have a backup. But okay, let's get to the Octobox that everyone seems to ask about. Okay, this is, I think I've called it this before. This is my secret weapon. I love this thing. It's an Octobox. It's an easy setup Octobox. You just reach on the inside, put it up to your chest, pull it back, hear the click, and it's set up. It's ready to go, man. This thing's awesome. It is a Bowens mount, which means it's pretty universal to a lot of other different types of flashes, not just Godox. So when I'm using a flash like this or one of my bigger ones, oh, you know what? I actually forgot to mention my other flash. Anyway, I'll show it to you here in a bit. Anyway, so have the flash here with the Bowens mount. You got the bulb exposed right there. Place it in the appropriate slots, give it a rotation. You hear the click, boom. You are ready to go. And yeah, if you've ever seen any of my posts or photos, kind of behind the scenes photos where I'm using this, I do kind of hold this like it's like a pistol grip to fire it in different directions. This is, I'm looking at it right here on B&H. This is the Photo Diox Easy Pro Octagon Softbox. This is the 36-inch model Bowens mount. But the last flash that I'll show you is my AD600 Pro. And yes, I need to use 2 hands to hold this thing up because this probably weighs, it's definitely over 5 pounds, maybe 8, possibly 10 pounds. This thing is a monster and it is bright. If you want to mimic the sun, this is a great flash to do it. But if you notice, my hands are going to be shaking. You know, the interface and the menus and the buttons, it's all pretty similar to the smaller 400 Pro. So again, beast of a flash, but real quick, simple, and easy to use. All right, my tripod and tripod head. This is the Benro TMA48CXL Extra Long Series 4 Mach 3 carbon fiber tripod. It's a monster tripod. It is definitely not the most portable, but if I remember right, I think with the camera mounted on top and this thing fully extended, the camera can reach, I think, 9 feet. And then the head, this is the Manfrotto 405 geared tripod head. Man, I think I bought this in 2000, either 17 or 18. I have beat the living snot out of this thing. It does not look brand new, that is for sure. It's been through its paces. I have a little bubble level mount hot glued to the underside of this. That's how I get my horizontal level corrected. And then the tape that you might see there is not because anything broke. I have an Apple AirTag attached to this tripod, so that way if my camera and tripod system gets stolen, I at least have some way to possibly track it. Trying to think of anything else equipment wise. I think that's it, but don't leave just yet. The other big question that people had related to my equipment was my setup, kind of my standard go-to setup. How do I use the Camranger with firing a flash, you know, handheld, things like that? So I'll show you. This is another big question I get a lot, is how do you mount the Camranger to the camera? I have seen some photographers mount the Camranger on the hot shoe. I obviously can't do that because most of the time the flash transmitter is on top of there, but I do know it is possible to even mount it on top of this. I'm just not a huge fan of that because I don't know, I think it looks kind of goofy, just one thing stacked on top of the other. So here's what I do. Let's put the Godox trigger on top of the camera. I actually mount the Camranger on the tripod leg. And how I do that is with this thing from Tether Tools. It's called the Tether Tools Strap More. You just use kind of the elastic Velcro parts to mount this to the tripod leg itself. And it doesn't mount perfectly, but it works pretty well. There's enough space between the USB cable in the front to strap it there. Boom, it's ready to go. And then yeah, take the USB cable, plug it into the camera, and that's it. And then, like I mentioned earlier in the video, I use my power bank a lot. You know, if you're on an all-day shoot, this one Camranger battery is not going to last you. So I use my other Tether Tools strap thing, and I will mount the power bank to it. Just run a cable from this to the underside of the Camranger to keep the juice going on it. And this will even, because this has multiple ports, sometimes will even power the camera. For some reason I just don't have a spare battery, which that never happens, but the option's there if I need it. And yeah, that's it. That's my camera setup. So I'll have my Camranger, hold the flash like this in my hand, hit fire on the Camranger, and boom, that's pretty much it. You'll see a lot of photos of me. If you might see behind the scenes videos of me, I'll have a Camranger in one hand and a flash or the Octobox connected to a flash in the other. If you have questions over anything, feel free to leave it in the comments. As much as I'd like to get to every single one, clearly I'm not able to. I'm a one-man show still at this point. I'm videoing, editing, not on top of being an architectural photographer. If this is the first video of mine that you're ever seen, please consider subscribing at the very least. If you got anything out of this video, make sure to drop me one of these. I would sincerely appreciate it. Feel free to follow me on Instagram at Matthew A Photo. If you made it all the way here to the end, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to watch. I really do. That'll do it. We'll see you on the next one.